Welcome to the Banff World Media Festival. Your session is about to begin.
So we're getting set up on stage here. We have an interview with Kara Swisher from All Things D. Very, very excited to have her here. So if I could call her to stage here, Kara Swisher from All Things D. Hi, Kara.
Hi. How you doing?
Good, very well. And I just want to grab my iPad. So Nagar, if you could grab my iPad and bring it out, that'd be great. So we're going to do the interview as a mime slash interpretive dance. So
maybe not.
You ready?
Those days are over for me.
So great to have you here.
Thank you.
You were at nextMEDIA
10 years ago.
10 years ago when we had it at Bedeck.
Yes.
And Mike Caspro interviewed you.
Right, at P in Prince Edward Island.
That's right. And at that time, you were talking about the AOL and Time Warner
merger. Yes.
Merger.
Yes.
And some, you know.
That didn't work.
What's that?
That didn't work.
It didn't work. It didn't work, exactly. Yeah. But, you know.
But spectacularly bad, but at least it didn't work a lot.
And some things never change, I guess.
Well, yeah, I guess not. Yeah, that particular merger at least.
Kara's been covering the digital scene since the mid-90s out of Silicon Valley, has interviewed, if you're a leader of digital, you've been interviewed by Kara. So it is quite an honor to interview Kara. Bill Gates, Steve Jobs, the only person to have interviewed them in one interview together.
Yeah.
Larry Page, Mark Zuckerberg, you know.
Yep.
What was that like with Steve Jobs and Bill Gates?
Well, it's interesting. We run a conference called All Things Digital, which we're putting up all the videos now on our site. This week, it happened last week actually, and we had Tim Cook there this year, which is his first interview he's given since he took over at Apple. And so one of the things we've been lucky with is Steve came to 6 of our 10 D conferences over the past 10 years. I'm not sure why he did, maybe a glutton for punishment, but he wanted to speak out. He wanted a forum to speak out at, and most of the forums that he ran himself. He was sort of, Apple's kind of a, I don't mean to say this in a negative way, but a fascist organization. And so they like to run things the way they want to run things. And so it was nice to have him unguarded. And so he came to, did about 6 interviews, I guess. We just put all the videos online for free, about 9 hours of videos of him, which are the only really journalistic interviews he did over the last, at least the last 10 years of his life, publicly in a video form. And the one we really wanted to get together was him and Bill Gates, because we consider them the twin icons of digital. And they didn't like each other, too, which is even better when you're doing an interview. Or they did like each other. They had sort of a weird push-me, pull-you relationship. And we wanted not necessarily to focus on that, but to talk to them at D5, which was about 5 or 6 years ago, about what they thought, how they together formed the internet, and not the internet industry, but the digital sort of. It's sort of like having Thomas Edison and Henry Ford together discussing innovation in the early 20th century.
Because it's quite interesting. You know, your publication's called All Things D, so All Things Digital.
Right.
You know, what is, to you, the digital industry?
Right now, you know, it's almost anything. It's sort of like saying, what's electricity? I think the problem with digital right now is that everybody sort of is still in the ooh and ah period, like a car. Oh, look at that car go by. Can you imagine, you know, except if it's a really nice car. We're still in that phase of the digital industry where it's really something that's remarkable rather than normal. I don't think this morning when I got up, I didn't turn on the blow dryer and say, you know, the electrical grid, and discuss it endlessly. It's really kind of an interesting time period because we're in a period where the companies that were founded, especially the internet companies, are all run by their founders, including Microsoft. Bill Gates is still chairman of Microsoft. And so you're in a really interesting period for the industry, but it's beginning to move out of this sort of, I call it the invisible phase, moving into the invisible phase, where you don't think about the internet itself, you think about the services it provides.
So if the Industrial Revolution was 1850 to 1950,
If you say so.
That's what Wikipedia
all right,
says.
Okay, all right.
And so in terms of the internet revolution, or the commercialization of the internet, this happened in 94, 95, so we're 10 years into it.
At least, yeah, no, more than that. But I mean, I think what's interesting about it is how quickly it happened. You know, in a very short span of time, this incredible medium has been provided to people around the world, really. in a way that you couldn't have and I think they show those charts and the rollout of electricity, the rollout of television, the rollout of radio and stuff like that. This has happened in a very short time span. And it's been accelerated in just the past couple of years because of this device, the iPhone, and the smartphones. But I consider the iPhone the iconic, probably the most important device of this last 10 years, essentially.
And how does that relate to the media industry?
Well, how does it relate to the
it relates to all industries, but in particular
especially
to
the media industry. What's been happening in the internet, it's decimated the media industry as it was, and it continues to do so. And what's really remarkable is that the people in the media industry still continue to not believe that's the case. It's sort of like watching a volcano erupt and erupt and erupt and say, I'm fine from the lava, it's flowing right towards you. I think anyone in the media space that does not understand the profound changes that have happened, it still happens, it still happens on a regular basis. But, the way people consume media now has changed so drastically in such a short amount of time, and it's changing even more as these things become more powerful and screens become more ubiquitous, that you can't be, the media industry today in 5 years is going to be drastically different. And for some reason, media people who are communicators, supposedly, spend a lot of time not trying to pretend that something's not happening. And it's still the case throughout the media industry. There's a lot of defenses, a lot of fixing, a lot of not listening to consumers. And one of the things I always think about, people always reference their children, and I think I will here, but we bought a big, I always tell this story because it's really instructive to me, but we bought a big screen TV recently, a new one, a real thin one, because they're pretty cool. And my kid went up to it, and it's one of those big things, and he started hitting it like an idiot, like he started slapping it. And I'm like, stop slapping the television. And he's like, it's broken. It doesn't respond to me. He's used to a responsive, immersive digital environment where you can touch and pinch and move and stuff like that. The TV's broken. He's not. He shouldn't have been hitting the television. But the fact of the matter is he understands what's changed and how much what he's doing is much more important than how we think about it. I mean, my kids don't watch linear television in any way whatsoever. They consider television Apple TV or Roku or Amazon or whatever. They consider, when they're buying things, they don't consider the network implications. They don't consider how it's delivered. They don't care how it's delivered. They consider the services that they're getting to them. And over the weekend, we were in a video store, where you rent DVDs. And my kids were like, oh, look, all the DVDs, we can have them. And they had just never been in a real video store environment. And as they walked down the aisle, the poor guy was sitting, this sort of schlub was sitting at the front, and they go, oh, we can get that on Netflix. Oh, we can get that on Amazon. And I said, it's really rude to insult someone's, say Netflix in a video store at this moment in time. But they didn't even think about it. They didn't think about the implications or what's happened. But their thinking has changed so profoundly that I don't think people still continues not to sink into the media industry.
So Blockbuster, for instance, they're not thinking of.
When's the last time you were in a Blockbuster?
Well, they're all closing up.
Yeah, right, they're depressing. Oh, any of those stores are depressing. But that was an entire industry. And what you have to think about is these industries are not getting replaced necessarily in the same level. They're getting collapsed. Like think about the classified industry, which got me interested in the internet in the first place. I worked at the Washington Post. And all I could think about was this was all going to be digitized. Why wouldn't it? And so the Washington Post relied very heavily on static ads that were expensive, delivered to you by surly salespeople at a price that was too high, that was ineffective. What a fantastic product. Please, let me have some. And the newspaper industry relied on that for years. And when Craigslist or whatever came in to a city, this was, say in San Francisco, it was a $70 million business, the classified business, or probably higher than that. It collapsed it, and now it's a $7 million business. And
Did
it's
it
better
collapse it or dissipate it?
Collapse it. It's gone.
Because the money that people would have spent on the classified ad stays in their pockets.
Yeah, somewhere else. I don't know what they buy. Starbucks for $26 a cup. I don't know what they buy. But the fact of the matter is it doesn't matter. It's collapsed. It's not coming back. And that's what's really hard to grok. And media people whine about it and go on about it, but it's the fact of the matter. And if they look at their own practices, that's how they behave too. I mean, again, I worked in the newspaper industry for many years, and I worked for the Washington Post. And when I was leaving to go to the Wall Street Journal, I told Don Graham, who was a wonderful, wonderful man, he said, why are you leaving? And I said, well, the water's rising and you're lower on the floodplain, and I don't feel like drowning with you. I think I'll go up to the Wall Street Journal, and that's going to get drowned too, but it'll take 5 more years, kind of thing. And so, I mean, it sounds like, you know, a little bit mercenary, but the fact of the matter is, if you didn't see this coming and what's coming next is really even more profound, you really have to get out of the media business.
Let's talk a little bit about what's coming next then.
Okay. Smartphones, everything. This is every tablet. I use tablets among these things. This is not a new news delivery. I'm not here like, you know, John the Baptist telling you Jesus is coming, but this is really how people consume and buy their media has changed so drastically, and as these things become more powerful, they become more ubiquitous. We talked about this discussion yesterday. I have a concept, there's a couple things. Screens everywhere, everything, tables, things like that, where you put your TV. I mean, this is sort of science fiction-y, but it's not really. You put it down and we start, you know, moving stuff back and forth. This table is alive. There's a lot of experiments going on in Silicon Valley now and elsewhere where these tables are electrified. I mean, we don't want to electrify the children, but, you know, look at little kind of thing. So this becomes an electrical device, and then you start to move things back and forth. So you have ubiquitous screens. You have these things that are so self-aware and so locationally based and so social with each other. You have these. This is more powerful than I'm really old, but this is more powerful than the computer I had in college, which, if you think about that, is astonishing, and it's just getting more so as the cloud becomes more important as a means of delivery, and that these become sort of, I hate to say it, that the Star Trek geeks were correct, but the Star Trek geeks were actually correct. This is the communicator. This does everything, and then once that happens, you sort of move into this. I have this concept called. People call it ubiquitous computing. I call it promiscuous computing, sort of slutty computing, where everything is, it's everywhere in every aspect in your life. And on stage at D last week, Tim Cook jokingly called about it, but he wasn't kidding, about the sort of the self-aware toaster, the self-aware refrigerator. These are not new ideas, but they're now possible because of these things combined with the cloud, combined with everything else, such as, excuse me, the Nest thermostat, all kinds of things, self-aware homes, self-aware everything.
And to get there, you know, you talk about these platform companies. And so we're in a stage right now where the platform companies are applying their engineers to be able to create something to deliver that. You know, what are the platform companies?
I hate the word platform, don't you? It's kind of an icky word. It's like users when we talk about consumers. Users. The only other people that are users are drug addicts. Do you know what I mean? If you think about it, it's kind of rude to talk about people that are spending money on.
You know, how else would you categorize the platform companies? What are the platform companies?
Well, is a network a platform? Yes. Yes, it is, but it's just such an
a network with physical devices that you can actually interact with.
Right.
And the physical devices that we're talking about now are mobiles and tablets and television.
But who's controlling those right now?
Online.
Think about who the 2 most important mobile companies are right now. There's only 2. Sorry, RIM, but it's not you. Sorry, Canadians, but it's not RIM. It's Apple and Google. And Facebook's getting into the phone business, I suspect, and Microsoft.
And why are they? Because of the users that they have. In terms of getting into it, but why are they the most important mobile companies, Apple and Google?
They're the most important platform companies. Because they are the ones going to be delivering these services.
That's right.
Apple's making scads of money doing it. Google's making much less so, but they have scads of money from doing search, so they can, you know, try to move themselves into this more important area. I think they have 96% of mobile search right now, which is disturbing on many levels. But you know, you have 5 of them. It's Google. The 5 most important companies in media right now will be Google, Apple, Facebook, Amazon, and probably Microsoft with the Kinect.
And as they build out their platforms.
And then there's smaller ones like Netflix and the others, Pinterest, those things like that.
But they're not in the same scale, because what you're saying is that they have access to users or consumers.
They have users, they have credit cards, they have devices, they have delivery systems. What they don't have is the pipes necessarily, not yet. You know, they don't have the pipes to deliver that to the thing. And of course, you know, the Comcast of the world, all your cable companies have been trying to pivot into this by owning the content, but you know, really owning the stack is really the most important thing, because you can provide these solutions. This is an all-in-one solution that Apple controls, you know, the whole stack. Google's trying to do that now. They'll be announcing some things at I/O next week. Microsoft, I'm sure, is going that direction too. So they control the whole stack. Amazon controlling the whole stack. And then also being able to use their services. I mean, what's not happened is you can't use their services and other services. So I have an Apple TV and I have a Roku because I want Amazon. Netflix seems to be able to bridge several of them, but Netflix will probably get bought, would be my guess, by one of these companies. But these are the companies that are delivering the entertainment. And while it's really important to be a content maker and create the content, because that's what people are buying. I mean, last night I read the Hunger Games, I watched this, I did you know what I mean? I want this content, but the people in charge are the people delivering the system, really, because they're sort of the gatekeeper, the new gatekeepers.
So the content gets subjugated to the actual way it's delivered.
They need the content, just like television needed the content, but the power is with the people who have the services, because they can start to decide and tell you what. Now, the power really is now with the consumers. The consumers have taken control of their entertainment, and they're not showing any signs of wanting to give it back. There's no such thing as a network television season anymore. It's just ridiculous. I laugh when I think of them moving things around on those. Like, well, let's program this here. It's ridiculous. People program for themselves, and boy, young kids don't need it at all.
But in this power hierarchy, what about the connectivity? As a consumer, I've got to have an account in Canada, whether it's Rogers or Bell, to access that. And we're talking two separate.
Yeah, they're the electric companies. Yes,
That's
we
right.
need electric companies. Yes,
So
certainly. Well, actually, there's a really funny comic where it shows the internet. I'm so powerful. They go through each of the different important parts of the internet, and at the bottom is electricity, and at the bottom, and excuse me for saying this, but it says, "Without me, bitches, you're nothing." You know what I mean? Like, electricity is at the very heart of that. But it's electricity. It's not something that, do you want to be in the public utility business?
Well, how do you see that playing out? Because if these platform companies are multinational corporations, you can build out Google in Silicon Valley and then offer Google services anywhere in the world. So how does that work on an international versus national level?
You just make deals with all the various distributors. I just don't think being a distributor is the thing to do. It seems like eventually technology is going to overtake these companies. They can do whatever they want. They can put data caps. That's a temporary solution for them. But in the end, technology is going to make it much easier to deliver vast amounts of data. It's only a matter of time, a very short time too. So relying on that by saying, oh, we're going to stop bandwidth hugs, we're going to stop Google, we're going to stop Netflix, it's a waste of, it's good, go ahead. It's like pushing back the waves. You're not going to be able to do it. Eventually there'll be a technological solution, there'll be another way of delivering this information. Then Google, or they'll buy into it, or something like that. But it's certainly not, it's not really a strategy for growth, I would think.
Interesting. And I want to invite, we have microphones in the audience. I want to invite the audience to ask questions while we continue on. So just have your question prepared and feel free to ask Kara that. So RIM lost out on an opportunity then.
Yes.
RIM had handsets all around the world.
Yes.
But didn't have the approach in terms of a platform development approach.
Not just that, they had a device that was really unattractive. This is attractive. That wasn't. Here's someone who loved the BlackBerry. Trust me. I actually had one of my kids with the BlackBerry in my hand. That's what such a loser I am. I actually was texting someone, and the anesthesiologist happens to be a friend of my brother's, who's also a doctor, and said, "You really have to stop." I had the best relationship of my life with the BlackBerry, I would say. It was very fulfilling and.
Because it didn't talk back to you.
It did. It just was fantastic. It was completely satisfying on many levels. It missed the boat, the smartphone. It missed the internet boat kind of thing. It didn't have internet. It had internet browser, but it was so subpar compared to what has since come out, and it never could keep up with the same thing because it said, "Oh, we have this protected base of work people," and what they didn't foresee was that the people in the workplace were being deeply impacted by the consumer space. Everything in the workplace is now, impacted by the consumer space. The reason there is a Jive or all those Salesforce, that's all the consumerization of the workspace, and they did not see that trend in any way whatsoever because they were building devices that actively were hostile to what was happening in the consumer space. And so if you go home and have this fantastic consumer experience, and you get to work and you're dragging this, this phone that doesn't respond to you in the same way, why would you want to use that? And eventually, when the IT people who sort of, the prison managers of IT, there's no one less interested in innovation than CTOs of big companies.
Why is that?
because they want to control the whole experience. But people don't behave like that. They have these experiences that are very open, that are very easy to use, very internet-based, very social, and they want those experiences at work, and that's just happened. I mean, look anywhere you go, and people use iPad.
When do you think that shift happened? When did consumer expectations become such that?
When the iPhone came out.
You think that's when
Yeah,
it happened?
it started to.
Because consumers are fine walking up to their TV,
Well, yeah,
changing the channel,
yeah, they were
or
fine,
on
but then
the
they
cord.
weren't. And then they weren't. You know, people were fine with horses and shitting all over the street until they got a car. Like, this penicillin thing is fantastic. We're not dying at quite the rate we are. I mean, it's just like, it's just astonishing how much people fight the inevitable change of what's happening. If you look at it's like the newspaper business. I mean, which I have been in since I started. I don't consider myself in the newspaper business. I got out of the newspaper business a decade ago. But I wasn't in the newspaper business. I was in the news business. Mm-hmm. And for some reason, they got obsessed with the actual device, the newspaper. No kids wanted it. No kids wanted to use it. No, I didn't want to use it. I didn't want to open it up and get dirty. And it's just the delivery mechanism, if you think about it that way, was unsatisfying. And when I got a better one, I shifted to it immediately. Why wouldn't I? And one of the things was how much they held on to. I always tell this story, but I was at the Journal, and they wanted to do a Saturday Journal. Do you want to read a Saturday Journal? I don't want to read a Saturday Journal. I want to sleep on Saturday.
You'll read the Sunday Journal?
It's like homework on Saturday. Oh, good. More information. I don't, One of the two things I was noticing about the newspaper business right back then in the 90s was if you started to circle the things, if you took a newspaper and started to circle the things you didn't already know about, the circles got fewer and fewer and fewer. They kept repeating stuff I found out about yesterday on the internet. Mm-hmm. So as those circles got thinner, so they didn't want to change what they were delivering, something new, fresh, like The Economist or some other media publications did. But instead, they continued to do what they were doing. And then they wanted to do more. Let's do more. Let's double down. Let's double down on more newspapers, because that seems to be where this thing is headed. And I was in one of those focus groups, and they were talking about how we can get, I remember this question, just to drive me crazy, how can we get young people to read newspapers? And it was just a ridiculous question, because they aren't reading newspapers, but they love, there's nothing better than the news. The news business is fantastic. Mm-hmm. Like, people love consuming this stuff. And I put my hand up, and this focus, I said, why don't we tape a joint between every page, and then they'll smoke and enjoy the newspaper. And they thought that was being rude, but I thought, well, that's at least a good idea compared to like trying to create more newspapers or create something that
change the size, make them more
whatever.
colorful.
Who cares? No one's reading it. I mean, someone is, but not really. And you can have it, print it, go ahead. But it wasn't the way most people were moving to consume. That's not the same necessarily with some magazines, which are very good experiences. You can keep those. Some books are very good experiences. Physical books, but it's just the concept. This has the way it has to be.
When you talk about the changes in the media industry and the concentration on the actual experience, and the sort of head in the sand approach, mm-hmm. Do you see that in the music industry? Did that happen? People say that the music industry, they've had their head in the sand.
Head in the sand. They got their nuts kicked over and over again, and they're like, please, can I have some more? It's just ridiculous. You just sit there, and then they try to hold people up for more money. Yeah, sure, let's really hold back with the inevitable. Well, young people just steal it.
But at a certain point, didn't they start to reframe it and say, okay, they didn't go with Napster, but okay, Spotify got released, Apple iTunes, RDO, so now they've got some delivery mechanisms, they've gotten a little bit more social, they're making more money they're making more money off of concerts, so they found a way to actually get those margins back up.
I mean, it's still not responsive to consumer needs. It's sort of like selling, you will drink this Coca-Cola in a 64-ounce bottle over
whether you like it or
not. You know what I mean? It's like, I like the Coke, I don't like the bottle. You know what I mean? Like, kind of thing. And so we just had Ari Emanuel at the conference last week, who was very controversial, mm-hmm. As he's wont to be. And he's just the same as advertised.
William Morris. He's had a William Morris?
Yes, WME, yes. Yeah. And he was talking about how they should have done a deal with Napster from the get-go, because then they wouldn't have had to deal with all this stuff, what's happened. If they had initially done it. So they're doing deals with Spotify, they're doing deals, but there's still the economics
But it's a dabble, because
right.
If you take a look at, and there was a great conversation in that interview around Game of Thrones.
Right.
Why can't I get my Game of Thrones
right.
for $1.99
Love that Game of Thrones.
Why can't I get it for $1.99 per episode? I've got to pay $120 or whatever the package is for that.
Indeed.
So, and he was saying that the economics isn't there. HBO.
That's not entirely true. The economics right now, HBO makes most of its money from cable customers,
mm-hmm.
Buying the service as part of a package, yes.
They
But
get,
inevitably,
what, $20 per customer
right.
per cable subscription.
Then again, he turned around and talked about funding Friday Night Lights, the movie, through Facebook. There are ideas. It's just like they just don't want to do. The problem is people in Hollywood, compared to people, and I'm not saying Silicon Valley people are perfect. Trust me, they've got a whole bunch of.
Well, we're going to talk
lists.
about them in a second.
But it's like overpaid slave. They just are slave to the system rather than thinking of innovatively of how you could change the system. They're very well paid, and they want to get paid up front in a system that's changing so quickly. And there's been attempts. Google's trying these YouTube channels, which probably most of which will fail. But at least they're funding it on some level. That's stuff that should be being done by Hollywood to be.
In terms of the financing, because if you produce a
Right.
Game of Thrones, this is, you know, a $20
Very
million
expensive.
episode endeavor.
Yes.
You don't know if it's going to hit.
Well,
The
they
money's
don't want
gotta
to. They
come
don't want
from
to
somewhere.
alienate the cable companies that are paying them a vast amount of money to show it on those systems. But
Yeah.
inevitably, the consumers just are going to stop watching it and watch something else.
And so let's talk a little bit about HBO Go.
Right. Love it.
That's their experiment
Yeah.
with the
The woman who
direct-to-consumer.
runs it's a genius. People should give her
And
more
can you
money.
describe HBO Go for us?
It's a service on the iPad. You can watch it on the iPhone. It's not as good an experience, but it's just watching it on the go. You can watch. That's how I watch Game of Thrones. That's how I watch Girls and Veep and stuff like that. And so, if you belong to the service, it recognizes that you're a Comcast customer that has that service.
That's right, the authentication.
Yes,
so
you get
you still
authenticated.
have to pay your $20 to,
Yeah.
or your $100 to Comcast. HBO is
Right.
getting 20 of that, but you can access it.
Right.
So is HBO at a certain point?
Wonderful experience. That's what's great about it. It's a really beautiful experience, and it has a lot of add-ons, maps of whatever, Winterfell,
Extras.
whatever, more nudity, more gratuitous sex, which we all enjoy it on Game of Thrones.
So, and are they going to HBO eventually say, you know what, we'll take the $30 a
HBO
month from direct to consumers?
Yes, I think so. Years ago, we had Bob Iger at D, and he was talking about, he was very aggressive in doing a lot of digital deals compared to other companies, which was unusual for the time. This was about 8 years ago. And, he essentially just said, if someone's going to eat our lunch, it might as well be us. And he knew he had to deal with the cable companies and serve them, but at the same time, he could see what was happening. And just because the money's not there doesn't mean that's inevitably not going to be there, and it's not where because the consumers have spoken. They have declared what they want. It's just up to the entertainment industry to come up to it.
So at that point, HBO does the deal with Apple or Google
Right.
or whatever these platform
Right.
companies are,
Which they didn't like the deal with Apple.
rather
They're living
than-
with it, but they didn't.
because of the percentage splits.
Yeah,
rather than the cable company.
right.
Interesting.
Yes, they're starting to pony up the money. Netflix is. All of them are going to start to pony up the money, and they have the money. These companies start to have the money, and then it starts to get super interesting. And then what happens?
Mm-hmm.
Well, do you want to give it all away, or do you want to compete? That kind of thing. It's just holding off change is. It's so fantastically typical for people to try to do that. They do it all the time. They try to hold off all kinds of change, and it comes anyway.
So, but what does it? You talked a little bit in your interviews is that some of the people that you've interviewed that are leading the tech sector have this innate ability to predict what a viewer or a user is going to want to experience, and then aggressively move their company
Right.
in that direction and aggressively execute against that.
Right.
Is this a
Yes, they're perfect in Silicon Valley. No, they've had enough.
well?
plenty of
Is
buckets.
this a type of leadership style? Let's talk a little bit about the culture of innovation and
Yeah.
what you need to do to actually move forward in a space.
Well,
like
you
that.
have to be disruptive. You have to think of life disruptively. I think Mark Zuckerberg talks about it quite a bit. He's been disrupted this past couple of weeks with his IPO. That's certainly been a disruptive IPO. Disruptiveness is not caring about certain niceties, I think, is one of them. The ability to change very quickly. They call it pivot, and so they always come up with ridiculous terms to use for failure in Silicon Valley. Pivot is the new one there. We're pivoting our company. Well, some companies haven't. Twitter was pivoted from another company. Instagram was pivoted from another company. So the ability to change really quickly when something's not working. The ability to these are the good things. The ability to take a lot of that data and react to the consumers, rather quickly. The ability the costs are coming down so much to be able to move rather quickly with a small force of people, that's the most amazing thing is how many users you can get very quickly.
And what are some of the bad things if those are the good things?
Arrogance, juvenileness, being juvenile, thinking that their solutions are the correct solutions. They still haven't come up with an adequate advertising solution at Facebook. you know, not thinking about, not listening to stuff that does work from established companies. You know what I mean? I don't think Facebook listens to the advertising industry enough. But then again, the advertising industry hasn't come up with anything creative for internet advertising yet. I mean, some of it's creative, but not really heavily creative the way they do on television and stuff like that.
Pushing out banner ads. And
it's the same stuff. It works. It's crap. You know, it's not the way people are going to get advertising in the future. There's no one really creatively thinking, and unfortunately, the advertising industry is leaving it in the hands of a bunch of geeks who have almost no creativity in advertising. So that's going to work well.
So there's a big opportunity for
Absolutely.
A next generation advertising company
Absolutely.
to come up with. But you've got to in that framework, scale is really important. The thing about the 30-second spot and the reason why it works really well is that scale. It's, you know,
Sure.
you just produce it to 30 seconds or 15
Right.
seconds and go with it. So how do you come up with creative formats in a digital medium?
I don't know. I'm not an advertising person. I don't know. I have no idea, but I haven't seen it yet. I haven't seen something that's highly effective.
Yeah.
The only thing that's worked on the internet in terms of advertising is Google, which is direct advertising. It's like the Google is the phone book.
You're talking about search.
Yeah. Search is leads. Search is leads. That's all it is. It's leads, 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 and that's a phone book. So they took the one business, killed it, and then took it, and it's a great business for now.
But people can game the algorithm now, can they not?
Yeah, sure, whatever. Yeah, yes, and then they'll fix it. But I'm just saying, a leads business is a good business, and Google owns it now. So what's next? Where are they going to get into the more premium advertising, the banners? Some of it's creative, but very little of it's creative.
And this is what Facebook is trying to experiment with.
Well, not very well. I don't think they're trying at all. I think their efforts are kind of a D
Well,
at this point.
Beacon and...
Whatever, they haven't done anything any good. I mean, and that's why GM pulled out. That's why, you know, that was a little bit of a ridiculous press hoo-ha. But, you know, they still haven't addressed their advertisers' issues the way. They're an advertising company, and they don't seem to like advertising, which is a little difficult.
Let's go to the floor if there's any questions from the floor.
Hello. Let me paint a picture for you, Kara. So let's say these platform companies progress as we all believe they will.
Yeah.
And let's say you have a country of 35 million people who believe that their experience is unique and different than that south of the border, despite the fact that we might not have Denny's, we still go out in track pants and eat ridiculous amounts of food. And let's say that the content industry believes that the government will come and save the day and try to regulate these mammoth organizations and force them to either develop or
Are you talking
show.
about Canada?
Maybe.
You're talking about Canada, right?
Force or show 30% of the content on those large
Yeah.
networks to be Canadian only.
Yeah.
What happens when the government goes toe-to-toe and tries to hold those waves back from those large companies?
Let me begin by saying I'm from San Francisco. I'm very liberal. There's nothing the government does that is usually very effective in areas of innovation, almost nothing, and it should keep the hell out of it. You know, can you imagine if the mayor of San Jose determined which companies in Silicon Valley got funded? You wouldn't have a Google. I don't know what you'd have. You'd have something. You wouldn't have any of these companies. Government should not be involved. Here's how government should be involved in innovation. Create massive broadband, create incentives for broadband usage all over the country. One, it's really important. It's like the state highway system. It's like the telephone system. It's really important to have high-speed internet access everywhere, and whatever incentives they can provide to do that, great thing for the government to do. They never do that very well. They get sucked up into horrible hearings forever, and that's one role. Two, have a really good education system in math and science and also the arts in order to provide people to be able to do this stuff. And that's pretty much all I want from the government in terms of the internet, and let everything else take its course. I think when you start to legislate how much people can, how much investment needs to be made, you sort of, it just hinders innovation. It doesn't work. The thing that's worked, the industries that are thriving are still Silicon Valley, and it's because it's largely a hands-off system with the government very peripherally involved. And there are important areas for government, and I do believe these companies will abuse things if they aren't properly regulated in terms of privacy. That's another area government should be involved in, very carefully evaluating privacy issues for consumers who don't seem to care about them as much as they perhaps should. Some consumers do, not many. And so there's certain key areas the government should be involved in. Otherwise, get the hell out of the way and see what can happen. The minute they start, you know, a government person starts meddling in the internet stuff, it just turns into disaster. It never doesn't. It never does. It seems like, it's just so typical of government people wanting to do that. It's not their job.
You talked a little bit about the trifecta needed for innovation.
Right.
Can you expand on that a little bit?
For innovation?
Yeah, or to create a culture of innovation.
Well, the ability for free flows of capital, the ability for people to feel safe, that they can safely invest kind of things. I mean, this Facebook thing has been very damaging to people because now there's not an IPO escape route for good companies at least, and bad ones. I think you need free flow of capital. I think you need a strong math, science, just a strong educational element. I mean, I don't know what it's like here in Canada. I'm not familiar with it, but the situation in the United States is dire, in terms of education. You look at things that are, excuse me, going on in China and Korea. Now, I don't think everyone should be a programmer, and I don't think everyone should, we should just focus on that to the extent, leaving out arts and other areas, history and things like that. But how few people were graduating is just astonishing. It's just like in terms of the other countries. Well, they'll start to take over if they have these. This is the wealth of the 21st century. Are these technological tools? And right now, at least right now, the United States owns the field on this at this moment in time. That doesn't mean that's going to be the case. I'd sure rather have the United States own it than the government of China at the current government of China. So, it's the kind of thing you have to think about when you're planning. But you certainly don't want the government to be involved in innovation. And then you need high-speed access. And then, eventually these companies, these prices will come down. The price of this thing has come down rather astonishingly, especially with subsidies and things like that. But all these devices, the prices of these are going to be free eventually. These will cost almost nothing. And then they go to Africa. When these start to get into developing countries, it's an astonishing change. You can imagine if this thing was free, all the information they can get over it. It's not the solution to the world's problems. There's always going to be wars. There's always going to be starvation. That's the human condition. But once you start to introduce, at least knowledge or online education into these countries, the stuff that Sal Khan at the Khan Academy is doing, the stuff that Harvard and MIT are doing, Stanford is involved in it. I don't know what's going on up here. Once you start to think about online education over these devices, it becomes really interesting. And one of the things I was talking to someone, we were talking about this last night. The problem right now that I foresee is that this guy in Silicon Valley, he's a rug guy. He sells rugs in Silicon Valley, but he's invested in a lot of internet companies because they buy his rugs and then he takes stock instead for selling his Persian rugs.
It's like this graffiti artist at Facebook.
Yeah, right. I hope he's sold. So the stock's going to keep going down for a while. I was asking him, because he's a really smart guy, what he thought was going on in Silicon Valley. He said there's a lot of big brains chasing small ideas. And that's really true. That's what's really the shame of it. I mean, like, how many words with friends and Angry Birds do we friggin' need? You know what I mean? This is what our greatest minds are thinking about.
How to get people to click on things.
Let's put a filter on a photo. Wow, that's fantastic. Let's sell it for $1 billion. And so what you need is to have these tools can be profoundly important to people if they're not silly. You can have the silly stuff, but there's some great big ideas. Like, I think the Google self-driving car is a huge idea.
Why?
Because commuting, it takes up so much gas, it takes up so much energy, there's accidents, there's all kinds of things. If we can just change conservation if these cars are smarter than we are and they can presumably not get into traffic jams, it starts to really iterate. And so when you think of some of these things that are going on using internet technologies, if you get them into Africa and you get healthcare information there, if crop prices in India, if these farmers get these instant prices right when they're getting them, they don't get cheated by the thing. It starts to iterate in a way that you really begin to see real, true, profound change instead of just another, I don't know, whatever farm bill, whatever the hell they're making over at Zynga today.
Yeah.
Not that there's nothing wrong with that.
So. Other questions from the audience? Duncan? Do you have a microphone for Duncan? Go ahead.
It beats the pregnancy story. About 7 months ago, you were filing posts from a hospital bed in Hong Kong, and congrats on your recovery.
Yes, I did. I had a stroke.
Yeah.
I look great, don't I?
Good. You look fabulous.
Thank you.
Good to see you so well.
It was a fantastic stroke. I call it the Prada of strokes. It lasted like 26 minutes, and I couldn't talk, which some people were thrilled about.
But you were posting and still snarky, if I remember your headline.
I was irritated by the stroke. anyway.
Joe Wiesenthal, who I also follow on Twitter, recently had a New York Times Magazine article about a picture of him tweeting or whatever from bed beside his sleeping wife, which I have to think annoyed her a certain amount.
Yeah. I've been there.
I follow you, not All Things D. I follow Joe, not BI.
Yeah.
Is the future of media correspondence where we follow individual brands, meaning you essentially, and in the future, the role of the journalist is literally being as many hours awake as
Yes.
you? Is this a good thing? I'm
Not
challenged.
for me, but I'm glad to serve you also.
Okay, but what about my daughter?
You know, it's interesting, the role of journalism. It is interesting. You're right. I work more than I'm older. I've had a long career in journalism. I have to say two things. One, I've never had more fun than I've had now during this phase of the last 10 years of creating All Things D. I've never had more fun. You're in charge of you're like an entrepreneur yourself. And so that's really, for certain people, fantastic. For other people who are used to taking orders, not so fantastic, you know, kind of thing, where editors make decisions. So yes, people do tend to follow me, but I think they do follow what our brand means. And so all things D has to do with quality in terms of accuracy, fairness. Accuracy is really important. I know it sounds stupid, but it's really, when we say that the CEO of Yahoo lied, the CEO of Yahoo lied a lot, kind of thing. And, you know, we did sort of sink him because I found recordings of him lying about his resume. We stand for fairness, that we're still keeping those tenets of fairness and accuracy. At the same time, we're speedy, but not like a wire service speedy, but just quick, because we know consumers want their information quickly. And then we have an attitude when we write, you know, where we tell you the truth without clearing our throat for 26 minutes, which most mainstream newspapers do right now. You know, I can't read newspapers anymore. They literally, and then they tell you what they're doing, what the story is. And so, you know, you're following me because of what we're doing, but eventually become the brand. It's the concept of the brand in the new information age, which is all these things that are positive as far as I'm concerned. At the same time, you are up 100 million hours a night. You know, Twitter is highly addictive. I mean, to me at least it is. But it's also a way to communicate with your users in a way, or I'm using the word users, your readers, in a really effective way. It's only 140 characters. It's not that hard comparatively, and I'm not sure what I was doing before. I'm not clear what I was doing before, actually. I must have been sleeping or something. But whatever it was, I'm not doing that anymore, and I'm doing this instead. And I think it's just a highly effective way to have relationships with your readers, because I think these relationships used to be built on trust. You used to trust the Washington Post, you used to trust the New York Times. And so if you trust me, you start to trust all things digital. You know, that's the conceptual thing behind it. And it's, you know, one of the things I did back at the Washington Post was when I put email on the bottom of my stories. And all the other reporters were like, why do you want to hear from readers? Like, oh, they'll write you. Like, oh no, they'll say something to you. And I used to say, you know what, they're 100% smarter than most of them. There's a bunch of cranks. You know, you had your basic people who didn't like black people, who didn't like Jews, didn't like gays. You got them. They always write you. They're crazy screeds. But you also get a really high level of quality from readers who are smarter than you are, and you start to get a discussion going. And so when a story happens, and I think that's what's happened in the media, even Game of Thrones, everything, it's not just the show, it's what happens after the show. Mm-hmm. It's the discussion, it's the involvement of the user, and I can't think of that's anything but good for media, because you have a constant discussion going on about the story, and the narrative never ends, kind of thing. And I think that's fantastic.
But, and if you expand that to the role of the media industry,
right.
And you know where the Canadian broadcast industry fits in this global picture that you're talking
right.
about, it sounds to me there's an opportunity to create these content brands that have a relationship
yes.
with their readers,
right.
that through conversation, through entertainment
They have to converse with them. Why wouldn't you want to? I mean, one of the things, a lot of the media industry, they essentially have been vomiting up stuff at the readers. You know, some of it good, some of it bad, but really just throwing it at them and then just eat it or not. And I use an expression that my grandfather used to use when and then a lot of the stuff the blogs have been throwing up has been crap too. And people are amid this sea of noise and confusion and everything else. My grandpa used to say, if people are hungry, they'll eat dog food. Well, people are hungry for content. People are hungry for information. People are hungry for quality. You don't go into a store and say, what is the worst possible food I can buy? Well, some people do. But what's the most dangerous food I can eat here? What's the crappiest and least nutritious food? You try to look for things that are good when you buy everything else in your life. So you should feel the same way about information. And so people are hungry, they'll eat dog food. There's a huge opportunity to provide people with really high quality stuff and do well doing it, and do well financially doing it, do well in your career doing it and stuff like that. And I think that's the thing that's missed.
And provide that on a global scale.
Yes,
this is
absolutely.
The thing. It's not to, if we take the Canadian
Yes.
market, for instance, it's finding your audiences outside
I mean, inexplicably,
in Canada,
I have 800,000 Twitter followers. I have no idea why I'd have it. I think I must have been on some list of theirs, but I have I've got like 40,000 Indian men who write me on a nightly basis, who offered marriage proposals, which are very kind of, I don't know why they want to marry me, but you know, yes, I have a global discussion going on with certain people, and that's fine. Why would you not want that if you're in the media business? Why would you not want that unless you're really an egomaniac?
But kind of on the same note, doesn't this kind of journalism, I worry about how Twitter has rehabilitated Henry Blodgett, for instance.
You worry about what?
Can you speak up? We can't hear you.
How Twitter has or the internet has rehabilitated Blodgett, right? Or Henry Blodgett.
Don't worry about
and those sorts of things, and the length of our memory. You know, I've seen your back and forth with Henry, but the fact that, you know, what a horrible thing he did. And now all of a sudden he's, you know, a voice with all of these followers, and our memory
That's
seems
never
to...
happened.
What did he do? We need to...
Rogues have never been rehabilitated. I lived in Washington, D.C. Marion Barry, I think, is mayor again. I don't know. Didn't he, like, insult a woman and take cocaine? I don't think that's something new in anything because Henry Blodgett gets to be a voice. I think people are smarter than you think. I don't consider readers stupid. Some are, but I don't consider, I'm not their grandma. I don't have to tell them how to behave, and they can find out what happened with him. If he has intelligent things to say, you can read them with a grain of salt, or you can read them because they're good. You know what I mean? Believe me, I don't agree with everything Henry says, but some of his writing is fantastic. It always was. I just think it's like, it's not up to me. I mean, I think we're so like worried about things that, you know, there will always be a Henry Blodgett. It's not because of the internet. It's because of humanity. If you don't like human beings, you better get off the planet, kind of thing. The internet is a reflection of humanity. That's what it is. It is not a Borg that's created out of nothing. It is Google is nothing but, all the queries of Google, the intentions of humanity. That if you think about it that way, and that's the way you should think about it. This is a creation of humanity, a reflection of humanity, the knowledge of humanity, all kinds of things, and it comes with the good and the bad of that. If you get upset by it, you should, I don't know, go live in a cave. I mean, so one day, I was thinking the other day, I was reading something, and it was something really remarkable, and I put it on Twitter immediately because it was a quote that I liked or something like that. And I thought, when was the last time I didn't share something, that I just read it and kept it to myself? Just like, that was interesting, and I just can't do that anymore. I'm sort of not programmed to do that. I've decided at 65 I'm going to become a hermit and not speak to anybody. Okay.
But, you know, the concept of digital native, you didn't grow up as a digital native.
No.
You talked about your kids banging on the TV. So, you know, a lot of this type of sharing information doesn't come naturally to people. They struggle with it.
Yeah.
Not
really. Who does? My mother has a friggin' iPhone. She's always pinging me. You know, she's 100 years old. No.
I feel like I could share more personally. I
Why?
look through, I lurk.
You don't want to. It's not like it's a requirement. Again, it's like it's not the device that's the problem. It's people that are, you know. It's like, you know that my favorite movie is Soylent Green. I love that movie. But you know, Soylent Green is people. You know what I mean? It's just people. So don't share or don't share. It doesn't make you do it. It's just, there's a little bit of an obsessive compulsive quality to a lot of these devices, but you don't have to do it. No one's forcing you to tweet.
But, you know, so in this world, from a commercial perspective,
right.
In the media, if you want to build conversation, you've got to find people that want to continue on the conversation about Game of Thrones or about Silicon Valley or about...
Easier. So what? You did that before. It just was a smaller pool of people because here you are in Banff or wherever the heck you were. You only had the people of Banff to talk to. Now you can talk to them. So what?
Yeah. No, I think the point is that it's an ingredient in the recipe for success. You have to.
Yes.
You're not going to do it yourself.
If you are a media company and you're not having a conversation with your consumers, you are going to fail. Unless you're so fantastic that people just have to watch you.
But, and to the idea of smart people, Paul Lee from ABC was talking about this is the era of smart TV.
Right.
He's talking about modern.
They love that one, smart TV.
Yeah, he's talking about.
It's kind of an oxymoron, isn't it?
Well,
Actually, there's some really great shows on television. There's never been better shows on television than there are in this era, in this past 10 years.
And, it sounds like, what you're talking about in terms of delivering quality, in terms of delivering a relationship with the audience, that type of thing. David Simon, producer of The Wire, producer of Treme, really using a narrative to talk about the human experience, the audacity of despair that's happening in America right now and connecting around that.
He's got a bigger stage.
Yeah.
He hasn't changed what he's doing that drastically. He's telling a story. That's
no,
what
he was a
everyone's been
reporter,
doing.
and he used to write on it.
But he's doing the same thing. He just has more opportunity to reach more people. What could possibly be wrong with that?
Absolutely nothing.
So that's what I'm saying. It's just like, but he's still doing the same thing. If he doesn't have a good story, no one's going to watch it.
But he's surrounding himself with people and making deals with players within the space to amplify that voice.
That's right. So the power is in the content makers. Absolutely. The power is now in the content. They just have to stop acting like they don't have power. They have power. The people at the networks don't have power. They just don't.
But aren't the people in the networks acting like they have power in the
they
content?
do. They don't. They don't. Here's who has power. The people who are delivering it and creating these devices that have a beautiful system of delivery on it. And the people who make the stuff. That's the most important pairing going on right now. Not anybody else. No one else matters. I think we're almost done. But when I was considering writing another book recently, and I'm not going to because I don't read books.
The AOL Time Warner book was the last book you did.
Yes, the second one, yeah. So I was sitting in a room with a publisher, and they were talking about various things. And I thought, if we were playing a game of werewolf, you guys ever play werewolf where you kill people with blinks of eye? It's an internet, people in the Silicon Valley play it all the time. But if I had to kill everybody in the room, and say Jeff Bezos was sitting there and the guy from Costco or / Walmart, if I had to kill everybody in the room necessary to producing a book now, do you know who everyone would be dead but me, Bezos, and the Costco guy. You know what I mean? Or girl, whatever. That's the only people. I don't need a publisher. I don't need an editor. They don't edit anymore. I don't need a publicist. Publishers don't want to sell books anymore. They never wanted to. Now they really don't want to sell books. So I don't need hardly anybody but the author, the narrative, and the place to deliver it. That's all I need. I don't need any of the rest of them. That's gone. That industry's goodbye. You know what I mean? Like, I can hire some of those people to help me edit. I can hire some of those people to help me publish. But in general, they do nothing to help me. If you compared to 10 years ago, vastly little compared.
You would argue, there could be the argument made that financing around doing that. How are you going to pay rent while you actually create your narrative?
Right, absolutely.
So that financing
but certain people are finding all kinds of ways to sell books before, selling short books and stuff like that.
Crowdsourcing,
all kinds of
Kickstarter,
things.
VC firms popping up to do bridge financing.
Neil, what's his name? The guy who wrote Snow. Oh, he's a fantastic author. Anyway, he's crowdsourcing something. You know what I mean?
Yep.
You can do it. It can be happening. It's not going to happen for everyone. But by the way, there's only a few published authors that are successful anyway. So it's not like it's not the biggest risk in the world. There's a few filmmakers that are successful. It's a very small group of people. And then you can go take their money. So what?
I think we should end it on that note.
Great.
So, Kara, absolute pleasure interviewing you. She'll be around for the day, so if you want to chat with her, I invite you to.
I got a cold.
Yeah, don't get.
Yeah.
But thank you again. Really
Thanks a lot.
appreciate it.